It does for me too, because I've had a lot of friends that are in camera department, and they're actually the people who kind of got me more interested in labor when it came specifically to the film industry. Just to throw another piece of confusing information in here, the camera department has what's called a national local. So their membership is for local area 600 is all of camera department in the entire country. And then they also have like an additional alliance to whatever their literal physical location local is. But that's meant that and I think editorial department has something similar set up. But I wanted to shout out one of the he's one of the most influential cinematographers in history. His name is Haskell Wexler. He passed away 6 years ago. He had a huge influence on where we've gotten to at this point. He made a documentary about the death of a camera assistant during the filming of Pleasantville. Patrick, I think Johnny Jensen, at least for my class, brought this up when we were doing stuff about line producing and labor and everything in Hollywood. It's really, really good stuff for everyone to look up, in addition to the Sarah Jones accidents. But camera department has been, I saw your face, Kylie, like, yes, that's a whole,
don't even get me started on the Sarah Jones situation.
We could spend 3 hours talking about that situation alone, I'm sure. But Haskell basically was championing for, Greg just mentioned this in the chat. He was fighting for a 12-hour workday, 12 on, 12 off. Part of how he did it was through the creation of this documentary, which I'm not sure if it's on streaming, but I'll put that with the list of the name of it and everything with the resources that I'll put in the info box, or maybe I'll do like when I edit this, like a little card at the end of resources and stuff. So I really want to emphasize like some of this stuff when it comes to hours and true like work safety, the fight has been going on for decades. But because of the splinter that Fee's talking about, like so little progress has been made until now. And I think that's a big reason why people really want to capitalize on this momentum and on like the frustration and anger and how scared people were during the pandemic too, is because, I don't know, I got really like indoctrinated into, and those hours were so normalized, even though we were scared, even though we were begging for van rides home from set sometimes, we just kind of all accepted it because, oh, well, that's how it's been done. And the beginning of the pandemic, when those things were temporarily changed, it really showed everyone that like the studios have it in their power to give us better working conditions. If they have the money to just like suddenly create an entire new department, they have the money to shift all this overtime pay and all these meal penalties into additional shooting days so that things are safer for everybody. And it's not just safety of the crew. There's accidents that happen with cast too.
Oh yeah. And that was, sorry to cut you off. Yeah.
The kid from
Riverdale.
Yes.
KJ Apka. And I was going to bounce that off on you, Danny. I'm sorry I cut you off, and also bounce off Fee as well. And I'll take my hand down because I didn't want to like, overstep. But one of the things, and I'm fully willing to throw my union under the bus, SAG giving away 12-hour turnarounds in local zone all the way, because local zone used to be a 30-mile radius for Los Angeles. Yep. It is now to Ontario Airport. And I didn't
know that. That's terrifying.
Yeah. So this was 2 contract cycles ago. Sorry to get into the history data dork of it all, but this is the thing that this is what really radicalized me, is that 2 contract cycles ago, SAG presented a contract that they negotiated with the studios. And Danny, you and I had this conversation on Twitter with Calvin Starnes, who, if you don't know who Calvin is, he's a great IATSE dude who is also a screenwriter. Awesome dude. Y'all should know him. 2 contract cycles ago, SAG gave us this contract that they wanted us to pass, and there was no yes or no on town halls. They said, no, we must pass this.
Yeah.
And I took a look and I saw 12-hour turnarounds being that's no longer mandated. And I said, okay, if you are doing away with 12-hour turnarounds and also expanding the local zone, which if y'all don't know what a local zone is, do you mind if I explain, Danni?
Please do. Yeah.
So in SAG terms, and this might be a little different for DGA IATSE, but for SAG terms, where local zone is, it is 90% of the time 30-mile radius from the production office is how they determine it. It's not necessarily the Los Angeles based center. So like, for example, if your production office is in Sherman Oaks, it could be 30 miles around a 30-mile radius of that.
Chapman does a great job of replicating that. That's actually something I think that they do really well is we have a 30-mile zone that extends from our part of campus and 30 miles within that. Dope. And you have to get, which isn't necessarily the best way to do it for students because not everybody lives near campus, but they treat campus like it's the production office. And so students that are listening get that idea at least.
Yeah, and that is a great real world, assessment of that is what a local zone is supposed to be, is 30 miles from production office. SAG not only gave away 12-hour turnarounds in that same contract negotiation, they expanded local zone to be 50 miles. So local zone covers Ontario Airport, which I don't know if everybody in Chapman knows, Ontario is like deep in Riverside County. Like you're far away from LA. So as I was making mention to people and telling them why they should vote no on this, I said, okay, say you're a background actor who gets called from Central and you have to show up at Ontario Airport at 6 a.m. That is your call time. Because they gave away 12-hour turnarounds, you can work essentially a Friday on a Tuesday and get home at, okay, so say you start at 6 a.m. You wrap at like 8 or 9 p.m. You still have to drive home from Ontario Airport to your house. And that is definitely the argument with IATSE, obviously. And for the record, I think having a 50-mile local zone is fucking garbage. I think a lot of things in labor are fucking garbage. But this was around the time that KJ Apa crashed in Vancouver. This was around the time I said, do we really want to still have this? Do we really want to still hear these stories? And of course, at the time, it was the actors at the forefront, but everybody in the entertainment industry knows the crews work harder than everybody else. And yet, because SAG was willing to, and like I said, I will throw my union under the bus. They have bent over backwards to please the AMPTP, no matter what we have done. Like, no matter how much dissidence there is, the dissidence is painted as sometimes really ableist and going, this is delusional. This is, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't understand. And we had that conversation with this last contract negotiation that we did last summer, 2020 summer. And it is astounding to me that studios are so willing to go, well, they're like, well, SAG gave up their 12-hour turnarounds. Why should we give 12-hour turnarounds to everybody else? Everyone I know who wasn't in the politics of SAG at that time said it was absolutely bananas that we gave away 12-hour. And I'm talking like movie star friends of mine that I'm not going to name, but movie star friends of mine are going, I literally had to have my agent demand a 12-hour turnaround. Yep. These are movie stars.
And even before that contract changed, there were times I was typically not working with very big stars unless I was a production assistant. But a lot of times when I was a production assistant, I was the base camp PA. So I was still doing all the call sheets and prepping and doing the math for turnaround, which is, where so much of my knowledge about turnaround and how many hours people are working comes from is literally being the person sitting there exhausted because I'm working 18 hours a day and I'm calculating a 9-hour turnaround on the grips and electrics and doing the math for myself. And I'm just like, oh my God, if they have a 9-hour turnaround and I'm working an hour before they get on set and an hour after they leave, cool. I have 6 hours and an hour drive home. I'm sleeping for 3 hours that night. So yeah, it really does have this ripple effect from SAG, which, you know, you and I talked about that a bunch on Twitter, and a lot of people chimed in to agree with us of like, and you were horrified too when you realized that crew has never had a 12-hour turnaround.
I know. And that was my own naivety. I have to be really honest, because every crew that I have worked on, or every set that I have worked on, a lot of the times the crew got off the same time I got off.
Yeah.
Like they may have had an hour after, but everybody was fair. I can think of one job where we all had a Fraturday and everybody got off at the same time. That is why I was just like, and that's my own naivete and rose-colored glasses. And then when I realized, I was like, oh, fuck me. Y'all never got that. And that was my own privilege on that.
It's egregious. Like it is. I've had better turnarounds and better working hours on non-union shows because there is that assumption that crew has a 12-hour turnaround. So I have a vivid memory from like almost 10 years ago. I was working on music video, which, spoiler alert, have some of the worst labor abuses of any sector of the entertainment industry. I have worked a literal 24-hour day for a
music videos are the devil.
Artist.
Music videos are the true devil. I will just say that.
They are evil and they need to be unionized further. I'll leave it at that.
God, yes.
But I remember getting into it with a friend who was camera department during a music video shoot because they were non-union at the time. I was already well versed in a lot of the turnarounds, and we were kind of going back and forth over what the preliminary call sheet was for the next day and whatever. And he actually, like, I got very mansplained in this moment. This is not a human being I'm a fan of. Oof. So he tried to mansplain to me how, like, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no way we're not going to get 12-hour turnaround, blah, blah, blah. Unions are 12-hour turnaround. And they said they were following union rules. And I'm like, bro, I hate to break it to you as someone that's been doing union call sheets for a couple of years now. That's not what the turnaround is for IATSE crew. And in fact, because you're a camera operator, you get 9 as a local. I remember that very specifically from a TV show I did, calculating a 9-hour turnaround on the local B camera operator.
Woof.
I just remember so clearly filling that out because I would have like a giant chart on my wall of what every position's turnaround was. And you would typically, I had to force call that camera operator on those 9-hour turnarounds for a major cable drama, because otherwise he couldn't be there when the rest of the crew was. So when you have these staggering turnarounds for the crew, also, you just wind up abusing the people who already have the shortest turnarounds because it makes more sense to the production. And I'm not talking about producers, ADs, or line producers. I'm talking about the real people in power that are putting pressure on everyone to deliver things with the triangle of production: cheap, fast, and looking good. The pressure that comes down from the networks and the studio heads to make those things happen, like, everybody in between, their hand is tied and they're just a cog in a machine. So we're force calling this poor dude to make sure that he's there at call because it's cheaper for that person to have 6 hours of sleep than it is to change the call time of the rest of the 100 people that are going to be there. And the same thing happened to actors all the time too. I remember getting into a situation where some A-list actors I was working with were, coming to me in confidence and saying, this schedule is becoming untenable for me. Are you okay? And would it help the production if I called my agent and said, I will not do any more forced calls. And I actually like collaborated with the first team PA, or as the first team PA with this wonderful actor. I'll, off the record, I'll Kylie, you and I will talk a little bit more about this later.
Yeah, no, I would love to know who that is so I can.
Yeah. It's somebody I will hire in a heartbeat. And I continually I love the cast of that show. They're great human beings because they understood what the crew was being put through as a third area production in Detroit. Ultimately, just this factioning that Fee was talking about amongst all the different locals and guilds. I hope that where we're at right now, this is the rallying cry for everyone to work together, because that's what it's going to take for this labor abuse, especially in those areas, to stop happening. Good Lord, I think we all know at this point how much stuff is being shot in Atlanta. The fact that they're treated as a third area at this point, when there's so much production there, is nonsensical. They should be covered by the basic agreement, not the area agreement.
And Fee, I have a question for you to bounce off to you. Do IATSE, since you were talking about the divisiveness and how everybody is broken off, because there is the basic agreement and then there's the third area and everything, do y'all have other contracts that are not necessarily collective bargaining but promulgated agreements where does IATSE have staff that negotiate on behalf of y'all? Like, I'm very curious about this, because I think this is also SAG's problem that set everybody up for failure, and that's why I want to know.
I don't know the ins and outs of that, because as I said, I'm not in the union. I don't know if they have somebody that, I would assume that they hire people for that, but.
Okay, because the reason why I ask is that, and Danny, you might actually know this more with DGA in terms that their management, they're not necessarily a union. Yeah. I am just so curious because SAG time and time again keeps throwing everybody under the bus. SAG also has this thing where they will make agreements that are not voted on by the membership. We don't get a say. We don't get a town hall. We don't get anything. And they are promulgated agreements that are made up by the union staff, and they investigate how to make them. This is something, Danny, you might have seen me talk about with the influencer agreement.
Yes. Yep.
And I'm just wondering, do other entertainment unions have staff that just make contracts without that? Does IATSE have that? Because I feel the reason why I'm asking all this is that the divisiveness and then having contracts that are just made, I feel like that adds to that. And once again, I'll throw my union under the bus. We're the worst ones, and everyone in leadership is like, well, why does everybody hate us? Because we do shit like this.
Yeah. I feel like in a sense IATSE does, because there isn't a separate negotiation for the area agreements for everyone outside of the Hollywood and New York locals. There isn't. The AMPTP does not sit down with those, and there also is no like overarching. There's the IATSE president, but he's negotiating on behalf of the Hollywood locals. Like, there isn't as strong of a tie, from what I understand, again, as a non-member and from doing a ton of research in preparation for this, and also like listening to all the different, there's some labor analysts that I've been following that have been talking about it and done a ton of research into it, as well as union members that are speaking out on the Instagram accounts like IA_members, the and IA_ stories. There's a lot of them right now, and it gets overwhelming and confusing because nobody's necessarily acknowledging what local they're from for privacy reasons, because they're kind of whistleblowing right now. And that's in part why we don't have a current IATSE member with us tonight, is because there are so many, and Greg might be able to like speak to that a little bit too. Like there are so many traps that members can fall into right now. And there's also a lot of people that are sort of like gray area IATSE members that are not currently working on a show under an IATSE contract, but they are members. So they're able to, there's some like fine lines that are there also. So there is an organizational issue when it comes to creating more cohesiveness between the locals, but I think a lot of it's also cultural within IATSE also of, you know, there's this is complicated to talk about, being like, because I don't want to offend people, and it's something that crew doesn't really like to acknowledge or talk about publicly, but there are a lot of divisions between fully non-union independent productions and people who for whatever reason just do not want to join a union. I see that mostly in third area where the union leadership is not as strong and the union education isn't there also. I see it based on just like, I have friends that are in Michigan who left the union simply because the jobs weren't there. And it's not because they didn't want to be in the union. It's literally, there's no point. Because up until recently, for instance, Michigan was a right to work state. So there's that layer. There's so many layers of these labor laws from state to state that I think it really makes our desire to have a national governing body very difficult and complicated. I don't know what question I specifically want to ask Greg about this, but like I know there are legal issues here, right? When it comes to how labor collaborates and works together because of all these different state laws too.
Sure. So I can probably just quickly define right to work, or so-called right to work laws in states, just to indicate the problem. So there are about, I think it's 33 states that have right to work laws on the books, which are basically anti-union laws. They're sort of designed to shred unions' powers and say that you can totally work in this job and not have to join a union. And then there was very recently, there was a Supreme Court decision with just 5-4 of the 5 conservatives voting on it, saying you can belong to the union and not be mandated to pay dues.
That's confusing.
So yeah, and so it just makes things a lot harder in terms of organizing unions. Harder, but not impossible. I went to grad school in Iowa, and despite the fact that Iowa was a right to work state and that grad students are somewhat, are transient, they're only there 3, 5, 7 years, the University of Iowa had a very strong union and a very good outreach program to recruit grad students into the union. But yeah, it's tough when you've got 2/3 of states saying there's no requirement to join a union. And then, the other third, obviously, which obviously includes California, saying, no, if there's a union, you got to join the union to do the work, is helpful. If I can add in one brief tangent for student filmmakers, though,
yes,
I will
please.
Say, so
your expertise is very helpful.
That's important to note is my first web series was approved by SAG-AFTRA. It is from a young producer, young director, young writer standpoint. I think it's important to note that it is not impossible. It's not overly burdensome to work with SAG-AFTRA. Obviously, it was a new media contract, but they were, helpful and supportive. And the Canadians, which is the series I met Fee on, we almost made it a SAG-AFTRA series. We got hung up on the new requirement for liability insurance, but you should look into making your shoots a union shoot. In the vast majority of cases, the union will work with you. And B, even if you can't make it a union shoot, you can still like go through and say, okay, we can do 95% of these things for the actors or for the camera crew anyway. We won't be approved by the union, but that's no reason not to do them and sort of respect these work hours and salary things on set. So I do want to emphasize for new filmmakers, it is doable, and it's worth doing, even if you can't do it all the way.
Yeah. I was able to pull off doing my thesis as SAG during the pandemic, which a lot of thesis films at Chapman are SAG films. However, because of the additional rules for the pandemic, a lot of the producers, and because of the gap in education and the way Chapman is structured is a little weird when it comes to who's producing what director's film and like how far they are in their education. So a lot of producers didn't have experience to feel comfortable working SAG, and they got really bogged down and hung up on a lot of the testing requirements that SAG has. So it's definitely hard right now. If there's any, Patrick, you included, if any of the current students that are prepping thesis want to talk to me personally about, and this, because I'm just literally posting this on the internet, Patrick, if you can forward any, if you're a Chapman student, email Patrick and he'll send it to me and I can help navigate how you can set up your testing correctly, because it is a completely doable thing, but it definitely sounds scary at first. It's not. You really have to just bite the bullet, honestly. It's so worth biting the bullet. I'm with Greg on this. If you can hire SAG, it's so much easier to do it under the student contract. It's basically
really
free. It's basically free.
It really is. And I can attest to this as somebody who has auditioned for both before, like when I was younger and was getting experience audition for student films, as well as helping behind the table on films that are deemed student films, and also with USC. For full transparency, I went to USC. I was supposed to be a French major, but I transferred into theater school just because I had to graduate in 2 years because money. In learning with the cinema school as well, because there were certain times where I would have to personally get a waiver for me to work in it. I will say this as somebody who has worked a lot of different SAG contracts. SAG is very accommodating to student filmmakers. They are extremely, I would say beyond. Y'all are probably in terms of producers that I've worked with, in terms of commercials, y'all have better chances of working as a student filmmaker with SAG than you do in new media at this point. You really do. And as somebody who has been in the union for, some iteration for, 17, 18 years, student filmmakers who do union shoots tend to go on to really cultivate a great set and really cultivate knowing that the union rules state everybody gets rest, everybody gets turnarounds, everybody gets, and so I really want to drive home to that to any student filmmakers, going off of Greg and Danny as well. Please, 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 as much as I shit on my union, let's just be real. I am grateful I am in 2 unions. I'm very grateful to be in 2 unions, because knowing, and I did have a leg up knowing about labor in Oklahoma, and having a father who was a workers' comp and medical malpractice attorney and working in the workers' compensation system and having to deal with Oklahoma being right to work. I am so grateful to be in unions. And I really, really, for as many problems as SAG has, I'm grateful to be a member of a union that at least I know I will have a bare minimum of protection. And student filmmakers, please, please, please make your shoots union, please.
Yeah, it's really you will absolutely get the reward back, because it is something that you need to be familiarizing yourself with if you want to be a working person in this industry, especially as a producer or director. And like, it's not that hard to get set up. It's much easier than new media. I think the struggle right now for a lot of students is the extra testing that's required from doing it. SAG can complicate a lot of things, but it's absolutely doable. You just really got to start planning ahead from the beginning and really think through how you're going to set up your testing. I'm sure some of that has changed since I shot in June.
It has.
But that's not about, that just means it's going to be easier to do. So that said, I want to make sure that we can field some more questions directly from Patrick and see what we haven't touched on that he thinks is useful to him. And then, I think we're all old people at heart and we're up past our bedtimes. So we might wrap it up after that. But like, Patrick, what are you thinking? I feel like this is so much information you've not been exposed to yet. I want to know what's in your brain.
Not for me specifically. I've actually run across a lot of these things already.
Good.
But a lot of the students I'm sure haven't. But I guess my sidebar question is for you old people, like, how much longer do we want to go? Because I can sort of save some questions for another time and try to focus.
Let's just go through your questions and then we can kind of, however long that takes, we'll wrap up after that.
So we have been sort of over the course of the evening discussing different unions here or there. Can we just kind of go with like a clean list of what unions there are out there and who falls under what categories in industry jobs?
Yes. So,
absolutely.
Kylie, do you want to go through who's covered under SAG?
Yes, I can. And that is actively changing right now. So this may not be an exhaustive list. When I was asking Fee and Danny the questions earlier about promulgated agreements, this is where that comes in on, there's a little bit of a gray area on who is covered on what right now. As of right now, SAG-AFTRA, because it was two unions that merged, SAG covers as of right now actors of all, both background and principal. However, and I wanted to make mention of this earlier, Danny, but I completely forgot. I got sidetracked. Background actors do not actually get a seat at the table.
True.
They are in the union. They are in the union, but they do not get to negotiate their own contracts. That is on the principal actors. That is a whole other conversation we will get into on another time. So principal and background actors, that also includes stand-ins, that includes photo doubles. Mm-hmm. So for example, if an A-lister doesn't want to do a nude scene or they cannot come to set for one reason or another, there will be a person who from the back or from another angle that can match them will be hired. Fun sidebar fact, my mom was my photo double.
That's so
Pizza.
Cute.
Yeah. So I will tell you that story later. But photo doubles are covered in SAG. My mom's not in the union. She's SAG eligible.
By that rule, so am I actually, because I photo doubled for multiple actresses.
Yeah. So photo doubles are covered in SAG-AFTRA because they are part of second team as well as stand-ins and background. So then also broadcasters. So your news anchors that you see are under a SAG contract in many locals and in many areas. Singers, so background vocalists and people who do session singing are covered under SAG-AFTRA. Dancers are covered under SAG-AFTRA as well. And voiceover artists are covered to a point. It depends on the production and it depends on the type of voiceover work. Also, in terms of principal actors, yes, commercials are also covered on that, but however, that is also an ongoing thing that I will cover on another time. SAG is also trying to put their hands in a lot of places where they should not be, like influencers. Mm-hmm. And they are kind of trying to do a jurisdiction on creators as well. So like they want to unionize the YouTubers, I have told them that is not a good idea, and that should be under the Internet Creators Guild. That's another thing.
That's
but as of right now, that's another conversation. But they are trying to unionize the influencers now. So there's a lot of on-camera and also soap opera artists, and also certain radio artists are also under SAG-AFTRA. That covers the old AFTRA agreement. Some radio stations are still covered by SAG-AFTRA. Others, when AFTRA merged with SAG, decided to dissolve their agreement.
Yeah, I feel like that's part of what gets so confusing is a lot of these unions are not film and television specific. They're entertainment industry. So
yes.
If you jump in, if I'm missing anything, I have IATSE.net pulled up right now, which for anyone that doesn't know, it's IATSE, IATSE.net. That is the official website. .com is actually one of the Canadian locals. So this is just a brief example of what can be covered under IATSE because it varies based on the local. So production coordinators, craft service, honey wagon operators, studio mechanics, broadcast technicians, grips, electrics, props, script coordinators, production coordinators, continuity, production accountants, video tech, VTR, all the like standard things that you look at on a crew sheet for Chapman, if they're on the crew, if you're DP. That's something that I think that students frequently misunderstand is directors of photography, cinematographers, whatever term you prefer to use, they are not above the line. They are below the line unionized workers, unlike directors. Costume designers like Fee, it's a very massive list, and then it starts to vary by region. So for example, one of you guys might be able to clarify it, but in Michigan, the guys who drive all the different trucks are not part of IATSE. They are all part of basically the truckers union. Why can I not think of the name of
Teamsters?
Teamsters. Thank you.
Teamsters.
Yes. So in Michigan, if you drive any of the vehicles, including catering in Michigan is part of Teamsters, not part of IATSE. So you start getting weird little quirks like that across the country. But broadly speaking, if you are working on the crew of a film or television show, or if you're working stagecraft for a unionized theater production, you're probably going to be part of IATSE. It's actually easier, I feel like, in terms of the film industry and TV to list the exceptions. And your biggest exception to union membership is production assistants. There is not anybody in the United States who is offering union production to production assistants, whether they are on set, whether they are a writer's production assistant, which is technically a very different job description. In Canada, these set production assistants are actually protected by the Directors Guild of Canada. And in England, they don't have a unionized system, but they are part of a guild configuration and have more solidarity, I guess is the way of putting it. In the United States, there is not a single guild or union that offers admittance to a set production assistant, a writer's room production assistant, a art department production assistant, a camera production assistant. And in fact, some of those positions technically are not supposed to exist because they fall under departments that have IATSE membership, but production companies continue to get away with having camera production assistants. I've never understood how they do it, but on paper, that's not supposed to exist because they're supposed to be in camera department. I feel like that's a future conversation that I really want to do for a topic is talking about production assistants. That's something very near and dear to my heart, as you all know. I frequently joke that nobody would know who I am on Twitter if I hadn't been screaming about abuses against production assistants for the last 5 years, and a couple of key figures amplifying that. And I think that's the next step in this wave of labor movement in the film industry is giving protections to production assistants. That is something that needs to change immediately. I have a lot of thoughts on that. So that's kind of covers IATSE. The Directors Guild is, again, not a union, but it is more expansive than most people think. The Directors Guild isn't only directors, it is also stage managers. For stage managers are kind of the equivalent of an assistant director when it comes to theater, or also when it comes to multi-camera. Multi-camera has a position called the it's associate director, I want to say. Associate director. Yeah. Kind of like an AD, but they also have an AD. All the assistant directors, which in the United States are the first assistant director, second assistant director, and or key second assistant director, and second. Third AD is a term that gets used frequently, but that's not part of the United States structure. There's more. Production managers are part of DGA.
May I interrupt?
Yes.
Really quick? Some stage managers are not covered by DGA. They are covered by Actors Equity. It depends on.
There's also, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to make sure that, because I know some stage managers who both have DGA and equity membership. Yeah. So I just want to clarify that. Sorry for interrupting.
When it comes to people who overlap in, and I think you've seen this across the board, Patrick, if you overlap between pre-taped, we'll call it, pre-filmed media versus live production, a lot of people have multiple memberships because there's weird overlap or weird divergencies that happen. Unit production manager is part of the Directors Guild. And this is where things get funky again. The production coordinator is part of the DGA, but the assistant production coordinator is part of IATSE. So wrap your head around that if you can. And then the Producers Guild is kind of a pay your way in club. It's not meaningless. It does have substantial resources, and they do have, various initiatives, but it's not a functional body that would parallel with the Directors Guild, because it's actually they aren't part of any of these negotiations, I guess is the best way to put it. Unless they're also of the AMPTP. God, our industry is so fucking confusing.
It's so weird. I will say for PGA, as Danny, do you know Amanda Timpson on Twitter? Do you know Amanda?
Name sounds familiar.
She is, so day job, she is a reality TV producer. She is the line producer at Original Productions. They do like Ice Road Truckers, but she's also a producer. She joined PGA because when the WGA strike happened in 2007, pardon me. She had to become a reality TV person because she was graduating.
Oh yeah, we haven't even touched on that.
Oh God.
Of memories.
But she was able to join PGA because they had unionized reality TV for the producers on that. So it actually is very good if you are in reality TV and you can join PGA, but I 100% agree with you on everything else on PGA on that. But I will say for reality TV people, PGA has gone to bat. Not to be an apologist for the producers. I mean, please hire me. But
give Kylie and Fee and Greg and I, and in the future when he graduates, all the producers Zoom. Give all this money. We'll make really ethical, awesome content.
Yes. So, but I just want to say for reality TV folks, they actually do a great job making sure their sets are safe.
It's true. And honestly, I feel kind of guilty to have not even mentioned them in this entire conversation because they
don't need to be mentioned. They're
it's a whole extra tangent of our industry. But it is certainly there's a lot of labor things going on in their sector as well. So
absolutely.
Did that clarify anything for you, Patrick?
I think that's helpful, but did we discuss the Screenwriters Guild?
Oh, I feel, yeah, we have actual WGA members here. I'll shut up.
Who here's WGA? Oh, Greg, right? Yes.
Oh, no, I am
WGA.
not yet WGA members. Yeah, we're pre WGA, but I am familiar with them. Just very briefly.
The weird thing with writers with the union is that writers' assistants are in IATSE because they tried to get into the WGA, and the WGA was like, well, your job doesn't involve writing, so you clearly can't be a writer, which is just like very frustrating. I secretly really wanted the strike to happen and like drag on a little, just so that the WGA would be like, wait, having all of our assistants be on strike because they're in a different union from us is really a problem. It would be nice if they strike when we strike and not at other times. That was my dream.
So you guys correct me if I'm wrong. There's so many, it comes down to whether or not, much like when it comes to the DGA, much like when it comes to SAG, a little bit different than IATSE. IATSE, a production has to sign a contract with IATSE, obviously if they're from a massive studio, but it's basically based on budget. And this is a little bit of a tangent from what your question is, Patrick, but I think it is important for like general understanding, because I don't think Chapman explained this very well and it bothered me at the time. Any production can technically sign on to whatever union they want to work with. However, there are protocols in place with the AMPTP contract, the basic agreement that stipulates a minimum budget level for IATSE. And if you are producing a film that has a budget, I don't want to say the number because I don't want to get it wrong. I'm going to have links to the websites. People can look up the agreements. But I did what's called a tier 0 film. They have different budget levels, and then based on the budget level, you might have a different contract. This, especially when it comes to SAG, based on budget, things change. But if you're doing something that's tier 0, so like under $1 million, there's a slightly different contract, and working with IATSE basically is voluntary. As you go up in budget, I think it's $2 million. But after a certain threshold, if you're producing a film that's over that budget, you are supposed to be working with IATSE and signing a contract. There are independent films, and I think of them as like exploitation films that are designed to go straight to streaming, straight to video, straight to TV, that will go into third area and skirt those laws and have. I've worked on multiple films that tried to do that. I worked on an award-winning indie film that came to Michigan with a $4 million budget with A-list actors that was SAG and DGA, and they tried to shoot it non-union, and everybody called their union reps and said, this is not okay. This is clearly a union film. And the week before production, it flipped Teamster and IATSE. And production companies will do that so that they don't have to spend the extra money to do things like pay into pension and health, because that's money on top of people's day rates. So there's that component of also in terms of what winds up being union
tag
or
on?
not too. Yeah, please.
So one of the key things with some of those, the ones that are going to go straight to something, is that a lot of times, if it's going to, Hallmark or Lifetime, or certain film production companies that specialize in horror,
you're talking
instead
about?
of making it themselves, because they're known to be a large budget entity, they will have a handshake agreement with a non-union producer to set up and film this whole non-union film, but they've already approved the script. They are already planning to own it. It's theirs, but they don't buy it until it is already finished, because you can purchase a film and like, that's just a great distribution deal. And that's another way that they get around things that should definitely be union and higher budget, but they don't.
Yeah, there's some, you know, sometimes when I've been involved in productions like that, actually one of my final jobs as a second AD, I was doing a couple of made-for-TV holiday movies, and there were other issues on that set, but because I was the second AD, and I had, because it was a small show, I had a lot of scheduling power. So I was actually able to keep that, even though it wasn't union, we acted towards crew like it was a union show as best as I could manage, because I had a different level of power than I would on something larger. There are sometimes shows that skirt those laws, but still, or skirt those bylaws, I should say, not necessarily legal enforceable things, but they'll skirt IATSE, but still treat the crew with the same standards and work hours. They'll act as if they have the contract without actually signing it, because then they don't have to pay the pension and health. So there's a lot of things. That's ultimately why I wanted to get everyone together, talk about this stuff, is to like give our insider information like that, because there's so many things to navigate when you're coming out of school and starting to work, or you're starting to put a film together as a director, if you're lucky enough to do that straight out of school. Or, you know, when Patrick and I call it kids playing with cameras, when we just like bootstrapped it and we're making stuff on our own with people before coming into Chapman. I've always loved that we have that shared history too. There's ways to still treat people fairly, even if you're not meeting the threshold of actually working with a union, and students need to learn how, and young filmmakers in general, no matter what part of the industry you're in, learning the balance between those things. I really think you have to wind up learning the labor laws, learning how all the unions work, and then tailoring your production to what you can actually accomplish ethically and in good conscience. So that's a really, really good point, Fee.
I want to jump off of what you said, being an AD and being able to use what little power you had to make an ethical thing. You can do that at basically any level.
Yep.
I think that a lot of the worst sets that I've been on, everybody felt like it was out of their hands across the board. And so nobody stood up for anything. And you can do like even small things. So I can't really stand up for my hours, but anytime I have an assistant, I can stand up for their hours. I won't allow any assistant to go into OT on a flat rate. I won't allow them to not be fed on time. I won't allow them to have to do 6-day without 6-day pay. Like lots of things that if you stand up for yourself, you look like kind of a selfish asshole and like they'll guilt you about it. But if you're standing up for somebody else, you can get away with a lot. Even like, so we were talking about meal penalties earlier. If you've got one person on set who is vegan or diabetic, who is willing to say, I can't do grace, it will mess with my body chemistry. Like at no point can I do grace. That one person, they could just let that one person go and eat when the food is ready, but they're more likely to then just say, fuck it, like let's break and come back to the scene later. And so you can avoid people working on an empty stomach, working extra late hours, all of those things by using the individual small powers that you have on set. And I think that when everybody just shrugs and goes like, well, it's the way it is, that's where, I mean, obviously the powers that be are still like the larger issue that we need to definitely deal with. And I'm hoping that the IATSE situation right now will help with a lot of that. But still, it's definitely not hopeless even on little tiny budget things to make small inroads towards ethical practice.
For sure. Yeah.
And if you don't mind me, Fee, bouncing off of you on an anecdotal point, I deal with chronic pain and chronic illness, and there are times that I cannot stand for long periods of time because I have severe fibromyalgia. And I mean, there have been days where I have been in my trailer writhing in pain just to get to be able to stand. And there have been times where I've gone to the AD and said, is there a place where I can sit while we are not doing this shot? Yep. And other crew have gone up to bat for me going, okay, if Kylie needs to sit, then maybe it's time that we all take a second. We just take a second to breathe. There was one time it was on.
I love the cat butt cameo right at the end.
Kitty!
Every time.
Kitty! But there was a time that it was around 20, I want to say it was 2011. I had to work on one show and I was having such a severe flare, and I just kept asking, can I go back to my room? Like, do we need me? Can I go back to my room? And 90% of the time on that show, yes, it was one producer that told me I couldn't go back to my room, even though I was not even needed in that scene. I was like, can I just go back to my room?
Too.
Yeah, I know. And you and I will talk about that later. But it really is one of those things. And I hope maybe somebody who is an actor who doesn't realize that they have this power as well on set, you can say, I have a medical issue that I need to sit. And this is covered under the ADA. I need to sit. I need to go get a snack because I have blood sugar issues. I need to XYZ. I need to go back to my room to take my medication. They have to accommodate you. And if you are an actor that needs that accommodation, that also gives crews a break too. Mm-hmm. And so I really hope people who may think that they don't have the power to say something, they absolutely can. And you might get met with some bullshit, for lack of a better term, but 95% of the time, you will probably at least get some sort of constructive answer of, can we wait until after this shot? Or, yes, we will have a break in like 20 minutes. Can you wait until then? Or you can just keep talking and go, I need to sit down. I need to use the restroom. I need to, and I also want to put the onus on the on-camera people, because we are the ones that the fans listen to. We are the ones that people recognize. They may, and that's the thing that I've kind of gotten from Twitter a little bit, is that people are now realizing, and they should have been realizing this long ago, that there are people behind the people that you see on television, and not just the money people. We're talking about, the guy who is hanging up the lights, who might be in the hammock, in the crew hammock for 10 hours and just wants to go home. He did his job. He's got to wait.
Poor rigging electrics just hanging out in the lights all day. One of my dear former boyfriends is a gaffer in a rigging electric. And of course we both dated gaffers. I kind of want to take that note about encouraging people to hold their ground when they can, to kind of sum up why I wanted to do this, and kind of give a little send off for all of us. And we'll hopefully reconvene for more of these things, and also do lighter topics. Not just I think, I know for sure you, Kylie, have seen me noodling on wanting to do a filmmaker podcast where it's just industry people talking about the industry, talking about entertainment, reviewing shows, talking about video games, whatever. I'm totally stealing an idea from my favorite video game podcast, which I'll also link because I'm just ripping them off basically. But I really was inspired to do this topic with this urgency and make something very ad hoc, because there's the biggest thing I learned at Chapman, because of my experience working as an AD with a lot of film school grads, was, first of all, Chapman has a phenomenal culture compared to most other film schools. I think it's so much less contentious, so much more supportive, so much healthier, and really is setting a new tone. I'm very, very pleased that one of the big reasons why Chapman got into the top 5 this year for the Hollywood Reporter list is because of having the best COVID protocols of any film school. I know a lot of the students weren't super happy with them, but that's just because we were in the fucking pandemic. Like there was just certain things that couldn't be budged on for safety. But I really think that they handled it as best as any school could have under the circumstances, and they listened to us. And, you know, coming out of such a big program, and we have a responsibility to change the industry, to change the tone of what happens on set, to be good leaders, to be more ethical, to really, you know, kind of change the world, not just on set, but like through the media we're making. Like we have that power because we're storytellers. And the more that we all can kind of embrace like the individual actions, you know, a lot of the people that are probably going to watch this from Chapman are directors. Like all the tips that Tylee gave about what people on camera can do, we can do that on our sets too. Like pay attention to how your ADs are treating your production assistants. Pay attention to how the grips and electrics are looking at your female actresses if you have a really male crew. Keep an eye out for people, because ultimately, you know, we're coming from a really big place of privilege if we've been able to attend film school. And even for people listening that aren't, if you're a director, you're the team captain, like step up and take care of people. And if you have any power in terms of like visibility publicly, speak up on behalf of some of these issues that are happening. Keep educating yourselves, keep getting informed. I know this is like a super long, it's like an hour and a half for people to listen to. We'll see how it goes.
Podcast, baby.
This is very like, ad hoc is the word for it because it's super specific to a topic, and also like very, when did I start emailing people? Like Saturday, Friday, and it's Monday.
You DM'd me yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. So I have no idea what this is yet, but I hope that it can be a little bit of a platform for us, and can be enlightening for people that are interested in learning more about like really what's going on the day-to-day level of the film industry right now. And I'm going to put a ton of resources in the bottom. So thanks everybody for coming to I'm calling it the Adhoc Filmmakers Chats. It's a little bit of a nod to my uncle, surrogate uncle, who is involved in a lot of labor and student activism at the University of Michigan back in the 70s and 60s. Like the literal famous ad hoc committee, he was on that. So I'm stealing this from Alana Pierce. Crap, this is so much harder than she makes it look. That is Kylie Sparks. They're awesome. Follow them on Twitter. That is
Greg. Don't. I'm terrible.
That is Greg, who chimed in with some expertise. And then below him, we have Fee Baker. And then this way, we have Patrick. Patrick, I have no idea how to say your last name. I just realized that.
Skehill.
Skehill. Okay, thank you. I hope somebody watches this besides my parents.